The situation surrounding Christian Horner has reached a point that can no longer be dismissed as paddock noise, especially after new evidence emerged suggesting that a major shareholding shake-up at Alpine could be the key to his Formula One return. What initially appeared to be distant speculation has now escalated into a high-stakes scenario involving the potential sale of a £700 million stake, ownership control, internal power struggles, and a team desperately searching for direction ahead of the most disruptive regulation change the sport has ever faced. Christian Horner's profile makes this development impossible to ignore. He's not a former team principal quietly waiting for an advisory role or a ceremonial return. He's one of the most successful leaders Formula One has ever seen, having built Red Bull Racing from a midfield operation into a modern dynasty. His sudden removal from Red Bull after a turbulent start to 2025 left a vacuum not only within that team, but across the paddock, and it created an inevitable question about where his influence would resurface. The new evidence emerging around Alpine suggests that Horner is not interested in a traditional comeback. He's not looking to inherit an unstable structure and slowly rebuild from within. Instead, he appears to be pursuing something far more decisive: ownership. That single shift changes the entire nature of the conversation, because ownership brings authority, permanence, and the ability to reshape an organization without compromise. At the center of this twist is Otro Capital, the investment group that currently owns 24% of Alpine. Their willingness to sell their stake, now valued at around £700 million, represents a rare opening in Formula One. Teams do not often become available at this scale, and when they do, it is usually because deeper instability exists beneath the surface. For Horner, this is not just an opportunity to return, but a chance to return on his own terms. What elevates this from speculation to a credible plan is the reported fact that Horner has already assembled a group of investors. This suggests preparation rather than curiosity. It implies that conversations have moved beyond theory and into structure, funding, and negotiation. In Formula One, deals of this magnitude are never spontaneous, and the presence of financial backing indicates intent that cannot be ignored. If Horner were to acquire a significant or majority stake, his influence would extend far beyond that of a standard team principal. He would effectively control Alpine's sporting direction, technical philosophy, and long-term strategy. This would place him among the most powerful individuals in the sport, potentially with more autonomy than figures like Toto Wolff, who still operate within manufacturer frameworks. Timing, however, introduces another layer of complexity. Horner would likely be unable to return to the paddock in an official leadership role until at least April, meaning Alpine's 2026 car would already be competing before his direct involvement becomes visible. That raises uncomfortable questions about whether his arrival would be corrective or reactive, shaping future seasons rather than salvaging the immediate one. Alpine's current position explains why such a radical solution is even being seriously discussed behind closed doors. Finishing last in the Constructors' Championship was not an isolated failure, but the culmination of years of strategic drift, internal instability, and a complete lack of continuity at the top of the organization. Results on track have reflected what has been happening off it: confusion, short-term thinking, and constant resets that have prevented the team from building momentum in any meaningful way. Over the past few seasons, Alpine has become a case study in how quickly a Formula One team can lose its identity. Leadership changes have come and gone at an alarming rate, each new figure arriving with a different vision, only to be replaced before that vision could take hold. Technical direction has shifted repeatedly, development priorities have changed mid-season, and the team has often appeared reactive rather than proactive when problems emerged. The 2025 season exposed these weaknesses brutally. Alpine struggled to extract performance consistently, suffered from poor execution on race weekends, and failed to capitalize on opportunities when rivals stumbled. Strategic calls were often conservative or poorly timed, while development upgrades rarely delivered the step forward promised. Finishing at the bottom of the standings was not the result of one bad decision, but of a culture that had lost clarity and confidence. This is the environment into which Flavio Briatore re-entered the picture. Officially appointed as a special advisor, Briatore's role quickly expanded beyond a background consultancy. His influence became evident in driver decisions, internal restructures, and long-term planning, even as Steve Nilsson held the formal title of team principal. In reality, Alpine has been operating with two centers of power, one visible and one far more influential behind the scenes. While Briatore's experience and authority brought a degree of decisiveness back into the team, it also introduced tension. His management style is forceful, personality-driven, and unapologetically political. That approach can work in the short term, especially in crisis situations, but it also risks creating dependency rather than structure, particularly when long-term stability is required ahead of a regulation reset. The potential arrival of Christian Horner into this already fragile setup would instantly change the balance. Horner is not a figure who integrates quietly into existing hierarchies. His entire career has been built on centralized control, clear accountability, and long-term planning, executed without interference. If he enters Alpine as an owner or majority stakeholder, the existing power structure would not merely be adjusted, it would be replaced. Reports suggesting that Briatore would be unlikely to remain if Horner completes a takeover are therefore not surprising. Two dominant personalities with fundamentally different philosophies cannot realistically coexist in a team that already struggles with clarity. Horner's approach prioritizes systems, structure, and sustainable performance, while Briatore has historically focused on individuals, influence, and immediate impact. In the context of Alpine's current fragility, that clash would be unavoidable. There is also historical context that adds weight to this potential conflict. While Horner and Briatore maintain a professional relationship today, their past disagreements, particularly surrounding Fernando Alonso, expose deep philosophical divides. Horner has always been wary of drivers or managers who dominate team dynamics, believing that no individual should be bigger than the structure. Briatore, by contrast, has built much of his career around empowering star figures and using their leverage as a strategic tool. The looming 2026 regulation overhaul amplifies every one of these tensions. Formula One is about to enter an era defined by new power units, radically lighter cars, and fundamentally different performance models. Teams that approach this reset with internal division or unclear leadership risk falling behind for an entire regulation cycle. Horner understands this reality better than almost anyone, having navigated Red Bull through multiple resets by enforcing long-term stability and resisting short-term panic. This explains why Horner is reportedly uninterested in a symbolic return or a traditional team principal role. His previous discussions with other teams are believed to have collapsed precisely because he demanded full authority over sporting and operational decisions. Alpine's vulnerable ownership structure and urgent need for leadership may be the only scenario where such demands are realistic rather than excessive. Driver management is another area where Horner's influence would be immediately felt. His record shows little patience for underperformance or development projects that lack clear upside. Alpine's recent driver choices, including the continued experimentation with lineups that have failed to deliver consistent points, would almost certainly be reassessed. Horner has always favored drivers who combine raw speed with mental resilience and long-term potential, even if that means making unpopular decisions. For Alpine, embracing Horner would be a high-risk, high-reward move. On one hand, it would mean surrendering elements of autonomy and reshaping the team's culture around a single dominant leader. On the other, it could finally provide the clarity, stability, and direction the team has lacked for years. The alternative Continuing on the current path risks condemning Alpine to the back of the grid throughout the next regulation cycle. For Horner himself, this move represents far more than a simple return to the paddock. It is about control, legacy, and reinvention. Returning as an owner would allow him to redefine his role in Formula One, moving beyond the constraints that ultimately defined and limited his final years at Red Bull. Would also give him the opportunity to build something entirely in his own image, free from corporate politics. What makes this twist genuinely shocking is not just the possibility of Horner joining Alpine, but how structurally plausible it has become. Investors ready to sell, capital already aligned, and a team in strategic distress create a rare alignment of circumstances. These moments do not come often in Formula One, and when they do, they tend to reshape the competitive landscape. As 2026 approaches, this situation is no longer theoretical. It is an evolving reality with serious consequences for Alpine's future, for Briatore's role, and for the balance of power across the paddock. If Horner completes this move, it will not simply mark a comeback, the beginning of a fundamental transformation. And if Alpine fails to manage the personalities, timing, and power dynamics involved, this shocking twist could either become the moment the team was finally rescued from decline, or the moment internal ambition once again prevented long-term success.